Hi everyone, Voltie here, coming at you with a quick little deck tech for a deck that I've brewed due to some recent changes. This is Sultai Frogs. I couldn't really think of a better name for it, but it's inspired by the old Kurgan decks that used to play Ancestral Recall and a bunch of 1/1 removal spells in order to gain some traction against their opponents. The two main things that I wanted to highlight about how this deck came about is the printing of Glob, Calamity's Augur. I talked about this in my Bloomburrow set review. I think this card is great. She asks very little of you and provides a lot of value. If you can surveil anything into your graveyard that works out of your graveyard, like Uro, then she's great. If you can play lands off the top or delve threats like Murktide Regent, she's great. And she's a potent threat in the mid-game. And the second thing I wanted to highlight is that True Name Nemesis has gone from 2 points to 1. True Name Nemesis was a very potent card at 2 points, but it didn't really have a home. I think a deck like this could be a home for True Name. Our general game plan is to play threats in the early turns that threaten to win the game by themselves. We're going to force a response out of our opponent, and the rest of our spells are going to be designed to trade resources until eventually we can play a card that goes over the top, generates a bunch of resources, much like Ancestral Recall used to. So in our creature suite, we have a Deathrite Shaman that's one of our points. It's the best 1-point card in my opinion, or at least it's very close, and it's easily one of the best 1-drops ever printed. There were a couple of other 1-drops in the deck list as I was making it, but I think each of them lost enough value as the deck became what it is now that I don't think we need any of them. However, if you want to play more legendary creatures and play Delighted Halfling, that's very reasonable. If you want to play more Mana Dogs even and play Birds of Paradise, then you might be able to ramp out some of these 3-drops a bit earlier. But I think I'd rather spend our first couple of turns playing cantrips, sculpting our hand, interacting with our opponent, and going from there. In our 2-drop slot, we have Baleful Strix, Fairy Mastermind, Jace Vryn's Prodigy, Psychic Frog, and Shoreline Looter. All of these cards, except for Baleful Strix, have the potential to win the game by themselves, either through immense card advantage or through actual damage, like Psychic Frog. Baleful Strix is simply too good of a card not to play when it's in your colours. Our 3-drop slot is a bit glutted. We have Brazenburrow, which is a spell, Glob, Leovold, True Name, and Uro as 2 more of our points. All of these 3-drops, if left unchecked, will threaten to bury our opponent. True Name gives us an answer to the Initiative and the Monarchy, which is really clean. Leovold is an incredible card and one of the main reasons I keep trying to make Sultai work. And Uro not only can be put into our graveyard, but because we're going to be filling our graveyard naturally, we're probably going to be able to cast it 2 or 3 times per game. Then we have Murktide Regent as another point, and that fills out our threat base, and Subtlety is more of a spell anyway. Our sorceries, nothing special. We have the 3 sorcery speed cantrips, we have 2 discard spells, and we have 2 card draw spells. Now I tossed and turned over Treasure Cruise. It was an Oko at one point as another 2-point card, but I think having 2 draw 3s in the late game is going to be enough of an incentive to play extra spells during the early game and trade resources really aggressively, and then going over the top. Our instants, so we've got some cantrips, we have some removal spells obviously, and we have the Mental Note and the Thought Scour. This is because we have Treasure Cruise, Murktide Regent, and Uro as ways to use our graveyard. We also have things like Jace Vryn's Prodigy, Threshold on Shoreline Looter, and Psychic Frog. So I think there's enough value there in playing these weak cantrips that we can get away with it. And I would expect that your first couple of turns would be casting cantrips or interactive spells, and then hopefully slamming one of these 3-drops and winning the game. We're playing both Baubles, again for the same reason that we're playing Thought Scour and Mental Note. We don't have Dragon Ray's Channeler or any other ways to trigger these, so they're a little weaker than normal, and if you want to cut the Urza's Bauble or even both, I think that's very reasonable. I'm going to start by playing both of them because I think we probably want the extra graveyard pieces. but we don't have any ways to use Delirium at the moment, so it's not that big of a deal having artifacts in our graveyard. We've got 21 lands. There's nothing really of note here. Because this is an 8-point deck, we have 2 Surveil lands. If you want to make this a 7-point deck, you'll probably need to cut maybe Uro and play a different 1-point card, or the True Name Nemesis. You could play Reanimate, for example. You could play the One Ring. As I'm making this as an 8-point deck, because obviously I'm trying to make more 8-point decks for the community, I also think all of the points in this deck are very powerful, and you might actually get more equity by playing the 8th point. So we have 2 Surveil lands, a full suite of fetches. There's 2 islands that could easily just be 1, and the Besaiger as our utility land and a Mystic Sanctuary. All of these can be tweaked. You can play an Otawara if you want. I wouldn't play a Takenuma. You could play the 3rd Surveil land. You could play the Zagoth Triumph if you want. I don't think we need them. So this is the mana base that I've settled on for the moment. Sideboard is decently standard. We have our 2 Blue Blasts. We have our Duress. We have a couple of Artifact Hate cards. We have a Collector Oof. We have an Energy Flux. Then we have a general suite of spells that come in certain situations. Pick your poison, submerge, extract. There's a bit of Triumph in here. I'm not certain that it needs to be there, but I think you do want a couple of extra spot removal spells for certain matchups, for counter spells are bad. And this and Sheoldred's Edict are some of the more interesting ones. So Sheoldred's Edict can deal with Marit Lage, which very few removal spells can. And a bit of Triumph can kill Planeswalkers, which is a pretty big deal. We have Douthie Voidwalker. I don't think we need to start it in the main deck, but it is very powerful, and if you want to put it in the main deck, that's perfectly fine. And then a Palantir and a Sheoldred as our extra threats. This used to be Undermountain Adventurer, but that has gone up to 1, so no dice there. And then a Damnation, which could very easily be a Toxic Deluge or anything like that. So that's the deck. I'm going to try to play this as soon as I can, and maybe make some tweaks to it going forward. But I think that if you want to play, trade resources, if you want to play the Grixis deck that existed last rotation, or the last format, and you want to trade resources and play creatures and then beat your opponent down, this might be a cool place to start. I definitely think it's very easy to make this into a 7-point deck, so feel free to look at that. But otherwise, there'll be a link down below, so you can click it and have a look at the deck for yourself. You can make a copy and tweak that copy for yourself. But otherwise, I've been Voltie, and I'll catch you guys later.